All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Calgary Power Platform User Group. My name is Maria De Soma. I'm the Marketing Coordinator at Iteration Insights, and thank you so much for joining us today. We have a really exciting presentation about Power BI best practices today with the Iteration Insights team. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to the Iteration Insights team to do a few introductions, starting with Chris Sorensen.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Chris Sorensen, so the founder and president of Iteration Insights. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, and I'm doing tons of training in Power BI over the last 4 or 5 years. In fact, north of 1,000 people that we've trained as Iteration Insights as part of our training program. Do all kinds of architecture work around helping organizations with analytics and Power BI and becoming more data-driven and using the technologies appropriately. I've done all kinds of public speaking and done a number of books with Microsoft Press, including some videos that we've just released earlier this year around some of the Power BI exam guides. But I'll flip it over to Jared now.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jared McKenzie. I'm the lead analytics architect over here at Iteration Insights. I do a lot of the back-end architecture work, so getting data from where it exists to where it needs to be. And I do a lot of data modeling work as well. Not so much on the front end. You probably don't want me doing that type of thing, but we all have our own strengths. I'm a teacher, mentor. I do a lot of work within the community as well, leading and guiding discussions on both Power BI, Power Platform, and Azure Analytics. And with that, I believe it's Tutu who's up next.
Well, hello, my name is Tutu, Senior Analytics Consultant at Iteration Insights. I do everything in Power BI, but my favorite part is DAX. So today we're going to be talking a bit about best practices in DAX. All right, great. Over to you, Diana.
Hello, everyone. Excuse me. I am an analytics consultant for Iteration Insights. I do a lot of projects involving enterprise governance, administration of Power BI. I have a background in actuarial science and statistics, and I'm very passionate about storytelling with data, so I will be running the report building section today. And I believe the following slide is getting us started. If I'm, not quite there yet. Over to you.
Once again, this Power Platform User Group is powered by Iteration Insights. You've met part of the team here today. And yeah, we run these user groups once a quarter. We also have the Azure Analytics user group. And it's a really exciting way that we involve ourselves within the community. Some ways that you can stay in touch are through the Microsoft community site. You can feel free to scan that QR code to stay on top of upcoming events and to see other cities that also have user groups as well. The place that we are probably most active is on our LinkedIn page. So this QR code will take you there. We post all updates of our upcoming user groups, as well as updates on what events are happening throughout the year as well. And here's just a quick little calendar of upcoming meetings. So taking a little break around the holidays, but we'll be back in February for the Power Platform user group and in March for the Azure Analytics user group. That QR code just sends you to a master list of events, so feel free to use that. And if you're interested in becoming involved with the Power Platform user group, we'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to reach out to myself. My email is right there. If you are interested in joining and being involved in the Power Platform community. And with that, we have an exciting job opportunity coming up that I will pass over to Chris.
Yeah, so we thought while we're here speaking, why don't we just kind of mention this? So we do have a Power BI senior developer contract position for a 6-month role with a possible extension. If you do want more information on that, I won't give you any more right here, but you can follow that QR code that'll take you to the LinkedIn job posting if you're interested in a role like that, and we'd certainly be interested to hear from you. Just one thing back on the previous slide where Maria was mentioning getting involved. So this is one thing that we really like to encourage is a big part of Iteration Insights is encouraging community practice, encouraging community to come out and speak and show what they've done. We really would like to get others up on the podium here and speaking. It's often difficult to get people that are willing to get out and actually speak, but it's really what kind of keeps the user group alive. And we certainly don't mind speaking when needed, but it's really incumbent on the community to kind of step in as well and do some speaking on that. So if you've got a topic that you want in the new year, as Maria mentioned, just reach out to her and we will more than happily accommodate you. And as somebody did mention in the chat window earlier, it was our intention to have this as a hybrid meeting. We decided to kind of the last week or so here to take this one purely remotely, but we will get back to the hybrid meetings where we have the in-person sessions plus running this hybrid as well. So Maria, you can fast forward to the next couple slides here. All right, so the Power BI best practices. So this is meant to be a fun and engaging topic. You know, we were kind of talking about what could we talk about in this meeting, and you know, we could do a presentation on some features and things like that, some of the things that are happening in the various release cycles. We thought let's do something a little different. Let's have a kind of a discussion and roundtable. So let's do something slightly different than we've done before. So what we're doing here is we're going to do 8 minutes per topic. We'll talk about what those topics are as we move forward, and talk about what some of the best practices from our point of view are. And once again, this is just us in the field saying, here's what we think is best from the best practices. You may agree or disagree. Once again, feel free to do that by raising your hand and we'll have a good discussion around it. You may want to add some additional best practices. So we'll talk about our 3 to 4 best practices to get the discussion going. And then we'll open up the floor for some additional discussion. If there is no discussion and everyone just wants to listen to our best practices, the discussion will end up going pretty quick, and we'll be done a little bit early, which is sometimes good and bad, but we'd like to get a little bit of discussion going around all these different topics. And just to make it a little bit easier, raise your hand if you do have something to say, or put it in the chat window versus just coming off mute and just jumping into the middle of the conversation. That can get a little hard to manage as we move forward. So hopefully everybody understands the ground rules for today. But yeah, let's move over to the first slide here. So Maria, go ahead and put that 8-minute timer on. What I'm going to actually do too is I've got my iPhone here too, just to remind me when 8 minutes is up. So I'm just going to go ahead and get that done and make sure that I do this for no longer than 8 minutes. We want this to be kind of lightning roundish. All right, so starting off in Power Query, in Power BI, one of the first things that you obviously do is you need to connect to data sources. Go find out where your data resides, connect to it, and then bring it into the Power Query editor, do whatever cleansing and transformation you need to do, and then ultimately load it into your data model. Should be that's what you want to do if you're actually using the import mode, of course. So through all that, just talking about some best practices inside of Power Query, and some of these may seem really obvious, but sometimes they're often forgotten. So the one that I like to say is number one to me is getting a good set of naming conventions in place. So making sure you've got names that are easy to understand. There's white spacing between the words that you're going to have, and I'll show you some examples of some Power Query in a moment. But naming conventions goes an awful long ways. In some ways, if you can make this a little bit self-documenting, that makes life a lot easier on your end users as they're consuming your self-service models. And later on, once you move into DAX and other parts of of Power BI, good naming conventions starts promoting a bit of a self-documenting model. So naming conventions, really important topic. Not everyone's favorite, but this one will take you an awful long ways. So maybe take a look at the next one here, Maria. So the next one is choosing proper data types. Once again, may sound a little bit obvious, but making sure that you choose correct data types inside of Power Query very quickly will once again benefit you throughout your model. And what I like to say is if you choose your names early and you choose good ones and you choose your proper data types, you're ultimately going to live with those through the duration of your model. So that as you follow your chain of dependencies from, when you land that data first inside of Power Query and do the cleansing and all the way to the reporting layer and then into the service, those names and data types live with you. And from a data type perspective, that influences how people can filter and sort data and things like that. So choosing data types is very important. So let's take a look at the next one here, Maria. All right, so this is one that a lot of users tend to forget about, is removing unnecessary rows and columns. And I always kind of like to say when we're doing our training classes around Power BI is, there's often some legacy ways of doing things where people want to bring all the data, including the kitchen sink, just in case they need it at some point in time in the future. And a lot of that really, in my mind, stems from kind of a history of engagement with technical groups, including IT, where it would take a long time to get the data that you wanted, so that you knew when you actually got the data you wanted, you would ask for everything just in case you needed that stuff, because you didn't want to have to re-engage with that group again. But with Power Query and some of the self-service capabilities inside of Power BI, you do have the ability to go and more easily get data on your own, should your organization allow that type of stuff, of course, and to bring it in. And then as you determine that you need new rows or additional columns, bring them in as you need them, because it's a whole lot easier to do that than it is to add too much. And then actually start removing things afterwards, after people have put their hooks in things. And thank you very much for that. There's actually a couple blogs that we do have on our website that were written just around removing rows and removing columns inside of Power Query and detailing all the different ways you can do it. Now, admittedly, when we did those blogs, we thought they were kind of just fun ones to write, just as an easy topic to explain a few other things that we talk about in the field a lot of times. But they turned out to be some of the most well-received blogs from Google's perspective in terms of readership and people coming to the website to take a look at those things. What that says to me is a lot of the topics that they're talking about today here around best practices, people want that type of material. They want to understand what is the best way to go ahead and use these products and make sure they build a good foundation and then start layering good foundation on top of the next foundation. Did I have one more there, Maria? I'm trying to remember here. Perfect. All right, so the last one here is only deliver tables that you'll use in reporting. So this one follows the removing rows and columns as well, but once again, only put into the Power BI data model what you know you're going to use. Two reasons for that is I always like to, in Power BI, first consider the end user and their self-service, what they're going to be doing with it. If you've got models that are smaller and focused, those models tend to be easier to understand and digest. And in theory, users will be more likely to stick with those models and use them and sometimes be less intimidated by them. So having smaller, compact, and focused models is a good thing. And then as users get comfortable with what you're doing, then you can add in more tables, more rows, more columns as needed, and then you just gradually build on top of that. So what I'm going to do here really quickly is, Maria, I'm just going to steal the screen share for 1 sec here. I'm just going to move this to the side and make sure I leave some time for some discussion here. But just to show you roughly what this looks like here back in Power Query is making sure once again that we've got our, let's see, make sure we zoom in here, that we've got our tables named well. You can see here I've got some tables that are not being delivered to the model because they're italicized here, so you can go ahead and just keep them from being delivered over the data model. They're important back inside of Power Query for various things we're doing inside of this data model, but they don't need to get to the data model itself, which would then make the model larger from an end user's perspective, plus then have performance implications on top of it. And then making sure that you go through and name your columns properly, so give them well understood names that are English readable, have some white space in between, and that they also end up having the correct data types on top of them. So I'm going to stop my screen share, Maria, and let's actually flip over to the end user board and see if anybody would like to raise their hand and talk about any best practices that you may have back over inside of Power Query. And what do we got here? On the timer, I've got 1 minute and 4 seconds. So anybody probably have time for a couple best practices. Jared, I see your hand up. Did you want to jump in?
I've got two ones that are kind of corollaries to ones that you were saying. One, you were talking about naming conventions, but a really important thing is name duplication. Having the same column name in multiple tables is generally a really bad practice. If you have the same name in different tables, they're different for a reason. So give them whatever their business reason for being different is. And then the other one, you talked about specific data types. I just want to quickly call out the difference between decimal and fixed decimal points. Excuse me. If you do not need more than 4 decimal places, use a fixed decimal place. It saves a significant amount of space within your models, and as things get bigger and bigger and bigger, it's way more efficient. So yeah, those would be my my two follow-up on the ones you said.
Perfect. And actually, you know what? We just had the timer go off here, so that is 8 minutes right there for Power Query. So lightning round over on Power Query. So Maria, how about you go ahead and reshare the screen, and let's move it over to the data model.
I don't know, is Maria control? Okay, perfect. We're getting to the one that I went. Oh, 8 minutes, actually. So first and foremost, when it comes to the data model, like folks have spoken about various ways of modeling data within Power BI for a long time. You can put all of your data within a single big wide flat table. That worked perfectly fine, except in one instance, but that's probably a little outside the scope of our discussion. If anybody has one big table that's big, wide, and flat and uses that, just look up auto exists within Power BI. It's an important topic to consider, and a very good reason for going into the star schema modeling. In fact, I'll pop into the chat in a second here one of the articles on the Microsoft documents for saying the understanding of a star schema is incredibly important to actually make Power BI function as it is supposed to function. It's a relatively easy thing to implement. It's easy for the business to understand, and the underlying engine within Power BI, the Vertipack engine, was actually created with a star schema in mind. This is as opposed to, say, the Inman approach, where you have all your data in third normal form. You're not duplicating data as much as possible. Maybe you've got things like a header and a detail table if you're using like customer invoices or things like that. You want to think about denormalizing your data onto a central fact table and dimension tables around the outside. It makes Power BI function significantly more efficiently, and you'll end up with quicker use cases and easier self-service. If you are doing direct query, you can model the data however you want underneath the hood, and it really depends on what engine you're using outside of Power BI for what your efficiency is going to be at that point. If you want to go to the next point I've got on here. So hiding non-numeric columns. This is I kind of go back and forth. I should say hiding non-numeric columns on our fact tables. If you are using data types of string or text values as descriptors or filters within your various reports, that's perfectly fine. That's where they're supposed to be used in the dimensional model in that way. If you're on a fact table, you want to try and remove your string values as much as possible. The most efficient way use Power BI for that type of situation is just have a big, long fact table with numerical values and keys to your various dimensions. All the actual descriptors belong on the dimensions. This is a reasonable way to actually structure maybe hybrid tables. So if you need to get that that detail layer within a model or within a report, have a hybrid table. So all your underlying numeric columns that you're adding up and aggregating in various ways, those belong in the fact table in Power BI. And then if you need detail, say comments or things like that in Power BI, then by all means use the various live or direct query methods that are available within that functionality. Also, hide your key columns. So keys are generally not useful for a business purpose. They're just used to join the models together. We need to have a single column in order to join our tables within Power BI, and they're generally not meaningful for the business. So hide them. Just use them in the model. Don't delete them because you still need them for your relationships to actually function, but hide them. Your end user does not need them. And then my last point on here, facts, 2 dimensions. So this was more in terms of relationships within the model. Start with one-to-many relationships. You have one row in your dimension table and many rows in your fact table. If the model is more complex than that, it's fine, but you need to have a very good understanding of why that's the case. You need to have specifically modeled your data so that it is understood that this is a many-to-many relationship. Making sure that you pay attention to the grain of your dimension tables, being one row, and in your fact tables, you can have as many as you want. Those are what you're aggregating for. So these are probably the 3 things that I would concentrate on first when it comes to. There's lots of other techniques out there, lots of different ways to handle various situations, but starting out, those are the 3 things I would do for data modeling. One other thing I just wanted to point out, because I know folks have asked about this before, I'm just going to toss a YouTube link from the Italians. I believe it's Alberto Ferrari on there from SQL BI, who did this one on the header and detail table. So understanding why it's important to use that star schema in there. So I know I've got, what's this, 1.5 minutes that's on the timer. Are there any suggestions that folks would like to include in our section on data modeling? Anything that beginners would benefit from? Data modeling is a tough one to crack sometimes. Doreen, go for it.
I think something that's really important and beginners of Power BI sometimes get confused on is single versus bi-directional relationships within your data model. So really trying to utilize single directional, and how if you implement a row level security, that having a bi-directional will impact your row level security. I think it's
100% agree.
It's a small tweak, but something that end users should be aware of and know how it's going to affect their model.
I would 100% agree with you. Yeah, making single directional relationships. It's also very good for performance purposes. All right, I think that's all the time that I would have. Anything else?
Yeah, there's one from Olu. Avoid many-to-many relationships. Yep. If you can avoid it, great. Yes.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right,
Thanks,
I'll pass
Olu.
it on to, I think it's you next, Tutu, right?
Yeah, that's me. All right, so we're gonna talk about DAX, but then again, right, DAX will only be as good as your data model. So if you follow everything what Jared mentioned, what Doreen mentioned, and even what Olu mentioned, right, it means that you're gonna make it easier for you when you're writing your DAX. All right. So there are a couple of things when it comes to DAX, and you know what, Maria, let's bring all of them up, like all of them at the same time. All right, add descriptions in the measures, create compound measures, and format your DAX. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Right, so 3 things that I want you to do, right? Okay, first, who writes a measure like this? I'm pretty sure all of you have seen measures like this, right? You're gonna go like, come on, man, what did you do? Right, come on, what did you do? Right, you're not making this easy for, let's say, other developers or even the person who is actually taking over the report to actually perform their job well. So yeah, man, come on, like it's pretty, I wouldn't say it's pretty easy to format measures, but it would be nice if Power BI have included that function in Power BI Desktop itself so that we can actually format the measures in Power BI Desktop. But that, unfortunately, we are not there yet. Who knows? Maybe it's going to be, maybe it's in the backlog. Who knows, right? Maybe it's going to happen, right? But yeah, when I look at this, I'm like, oh, come on, right? You can do better, right? So yeah, always try to format your DAX calculation, because if it's not formatted, and just like what Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari said, if it's not formatted, it's not DAX. All right. So there are ways to, there are quicker ways to, let's say, format your DAX. For example, here, you can always go to daxformatter.com. So what I'm going to do here is this. I'm going to click new, right? I'm going to copy all of this, right? All of this, including the name of the measures, bring it back in here, paste it here, and then click format. Voila, look at that. It's way easy to read. It's way easy to see what is going on. And we know that when it comes to Power BI, right? And when it comes to DAX, the function is not going to be evaluated row by row. Instead, it's going to be like from inside goes to outside, right? This allows me to see exactly what function can actually, will actually be evaluated, and then how it propagates outside so that it can actually create and deliver the right result. All right, that is the first thing that I would say. Like, please format your measures, because it will make things easier for you, and it will make things easier for the whoever that is going to take over your report. All right. Second, look at that. I'm looking at these measures. I have no idea what is going on, right? So because I probably wrote this like 2-3 years ago, right? And then I have to go back to the report and say, hey, what's going on here, right? So now I have to go through every single one of this to figure out exactly what is happening. So the next tip, right? The next best practice, include comments, man. Come on, like comments here. This is what happening in, oh, there you go, happening in the measure. All right. And the thing is, right, you can put comments everywhere. For example, here, let's see if you see here, this is blank. Why this is blank? This is the reason why we are returning blanks. Right, so you can put your comments anywhere in the measures, because like I promise you, if you do that, right, and then you have to go back to your report after 2 months or 3 months, you're gonna go like, oh, I'm so glad I put some description here, because now I know exactly what's going on. Because you know that DAX calculation can get really complicated, right? So that is the second thing when it comes to best practices in Power BI. The last thing, and it's going to be really important too, especially when you start creating reports, you're going to notice that you're going to be creating a lot of DAX measures, right? So use compound measures. Compound measures. What does that mean, right? Look at this. When I'm doing calculation here, I'm actually referring to a measure that is being created separately. So start with simple measures and then reference those simple measures. For example, here, total sales is basically this one. Come on, Power BI is thinking, my computer is thinking. Oh, there you go, here it is, there it is. All right, so total sales is sum x sales, sales unit times sales order quantity, right? So you start with base measures and then you create compound measures. Why is this useful? First, you do not have to repeat those calculations again, because they could get complicated. Second, right, if for whatever reason your logic changes, let's say come on, it's pretty common, right? The users come here and say, hey, well, this is the calculation for sales. But after a while, they're going to go like, oh, it's not really the calculation for sales. We're missing this, we're missing that, right? So instead of going into every single measures and update that calculation, all you need to do is go to the base measure, update the calculation here, and then all the compound measures will take over all the changes that you have done in your base measures. So those are the 3 things I highly recommend that you do in your DAX calculation. I love DAX, please, but I do look at a lot of people's DAX. So if you do want, be nice to people, be nice to the other collaborators, format your DAX, put some comments, and then use compound measures. It's going to make things easier for yourself in the future and for the other developers that are going to take over your report. All right, so let's go back to the to Maria, to your screen, and then let's talk about like what other best practices do you have for DAX calculations? All right, so one from Chris. Oh wait, there's
Tutu,
one
what are
from
your
Greg.
thoughts on
Yep.
variables? What are your thoughts on variables inside of DAX?
Variables is awesome. If you have calculations that you have to redo again and again within the same measures, use variables so you don't have to repeat it again. All right, we have one from Greg. When would you create a measure table for adding your measures versus adding measure columns on existing tables? So basically what you're asking here is like creating measures versus calculated columns. Is that right, Greg?
Yeah,
I
I've
think
read
he's
some
talking
stuff
about a
where
measured.
people.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I've read stuff where they say you create a table called something measure, and then you basically put all your measures on the measure table versus like what you did is that you put it on your sales table.
All right. Okay. So the thing is, right, like there is if you want to create a measure tables, you need to create a blank table, right? And then you move everything in there. It works. So if it's a small report, I would say do that, right? But if it's a report that contains multiple fact tables, right, I would highly recommend that you actually keep those measures within the fact tables because you still can actually create folders within the fact table. So this way, you know that these measures belong to this fact table, this measure belongs to this fact table, rather than consolidate everything into one. And then, or then again, this only works if you do have multiple fact tables. If you have just one fact table, it's actually really nice to have that separate in a different table.
Yep. Tutu, I can just add on thoughts to that.
Yeah.
I bring this back to data modeling because that's what I do. I always bring back to data modeling. The thing is that tables and columns within our model are we want to think of them as ideas for our business. They're things for us to structure various ideas around. So if you have measures that are associated with those ideas, they belong on the fact table that they're associated to. If you want to use them outside of the single fact table that they're involved in, that's okay too. But make sure on your measure table that you organize your principles in there. Use folders. Organize the measures saying like so I'm talking about total sales or maybe total product delivered. I want to have these kind of distinct ideas within that measure table that are distinct from each other. So use folders, use things that make it easy for an end user to drill into the specific idea that they're interested in.
Agree. Do I still have time, Maria? If no, then let's pass it over. Let's pass it over to Deanna.
But if there are any follow-up thoughts that you have on DAX,
there are a lot more best practices, but we're not going to cover today, right? Let's go to the next
one. It looks like
we can always revisit it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, don't really? Yes.
One question. Yeah.
Something I also think is really important just to know is when to use and know the difference of when, say, a calculated table, a calculated column, and a measure is actually in fact calculated. So knowing that if you're creating an actual column, it's only calculated at the time in which it's created and at the time the table itself is refreshed, whereas a calculated measure isn't actually calculated until it's brought into a visual. So something that I always like to keep in mind and point out to new Power BI users.
Oh yeah. Measures is calculated on the fly when you're consuming in a visualization, and when you're doing calculated column and calculated tables, only when the report is being the data model is being refreshed, also known as data set. All right, over to you, Deanna.
Thank you. That was awesome. I think we all, well, I would say like 90% of us are terrified of DAX. And then there's those select few like Tutu who are aliens who are obsessed with DAX. So thank you so much for giving us some tips for the scariest thing about Power BI. So now we're on to some report building, which I love. There's a lot of things to consider when it comes to report building. Maria, if you don't mind, maybe just throwing all three up there on the screen, that would be great. So first one is choosing the right visual for the data. And then I'll show kind of like a little bit of a demo of these things, and then use colors and accents to highlight your information, and then considering amount, placement, white spaces, and alignment for your Canvas visual. So these are kind of the main things I wanted to talk about with you. So choosing the right visual for your data. This is really important when you want to communicate how you want to communicate the data to your audience. I honestly wish I could have put like 10 best practices here or how to build a report. I could say so much about planning, layout. One of the biggest things I think is knowing who your audience is, who's going to be looking at this report. Is it going to be people who have no idea how to read charts, or is it the person who really needs to see the nitty-gritty stuff, the detail of this data? For example, when you're choosing the right visual for the data, do they just need to know like the big gross amount, or do they need to know it by every single day, week by week, time, little details like that? Or do they need to see the whole picture? Really consider these things when you're planning things out. Things like pick the right visual for comparison or looking for trends. We do have a guide that kind of goes over what visuals would be appropriate for what situation. Tips like a pie chart don't have more than like if you're going to use a pie chart, it should be only used for things, a very small amount of categories, like under 5. And it's so that the user can very clearly see the categories and they'll pick up the information faster, leading to quicker decision making. Using colors and accents to highlight the information. So you have seen sometimes when a number is in green and a number is in red, maybe in the stock market, that means the stock has increased or decreased. And sometimes you don't even need to know that the stock, like by how much it is, you just see green and you know that the number has increased. So use those elements in Power BI. Maybe you don't need to show the entire graph with all its colors. Maybe you can gray out the graph and then just color in the point that you want to be highlighting in your presentation to your CEO, for example. Also with conditional formatting, make sure with accessibility, conditional formatting is when you do like red, green, and yellow for certain information, or maybe you want to show high numbers as green and then different shades for how low it goes, the numbers, things like that. For people who are colorblind, I recommend for conditional formatting, you use more like symbols like check mark or circle for the yellow and then X for maybe red. Just little things to consider. And then considering the amount of visuals, I think we've all seen what a gross dashboard looks like. It's one that has tons of visuals. You don't know where to look. You're feeling overwhelmed. So really consider the amount of visuals, where you're placing them. I like to do it like a book. So read it left to right, top to bottom, and then put your most important information first. So put maybe like the grand total card first, and then go into what the second most important thing is, and then maybe a full picture view book of that thing. White spaces too. It's a good idea to have spacing between not just your visuals, but your titles, just to give your eyes the rest it needs between looking and analyzing and consuming information. So you're going to consume one visual, you're going to take a sec with that space technically, and then move on to the next one. And that's how books are formed too, with paragraph spacing and chapters. And I'll quickly show here, it's 2:51, my timing. I'll show my screen real quickly. This is a dashboard Tutu actually made as a showcase for Bow Valley College and for Iteration Insights using a simulated data set. But just back to the idea of telling a story, we usually use the template of having an overview, Then the next pages are more detailed analysis of whatever they want to see from that overview. We have page navigation. We have an appendix or glossaries maybe at the end, very important as well. So you can go into this dashboard. You can see how he used white spacing to separate things as well. So he separated the idea that this was a pane from the visuals, from the borders. You can tell separation from different title elements as well. With colors as well, it's really good to choose the correct colors. Usually we don't have this much flexibility because of branding. However, if you do get to choose the colors, consider color blindness in order to make those decisions as quickly as possible. As we know, user behavior is the only way to change organization behavior. So, and we want to change the organization's behavior through analytics. I would love to open the floor now to hear your thoughts on what you think Power BI report building, any other tips you want to bring up. Again, I wish I could bring up a whole bunch. I'm sure I'll be sharing more information in the new year about all of these things, but yeah, who would like to bring something up?
Well, people are thinking about any questions or not questions, the things they'd like to contribute. I did drop a blog that was written last summer by Deanna and another colleague of ours around the visualizations guide, all the visuals inside of Power BI, and explaining, use cases for each one of them. So that is in the chat window while people are thinking about additional contributions.
I do have one little one, and I will definitely give credit out there. I went to SQL Pass a week and a half ago, and Emily Meyer in the chat did a really interesting talk on visualizations and mentioned a couple of things. I only remember two of them. One was using movement specifically to call things out. I'm not necessarily sure if, how one would do that within Power BI, but I know that it is a very good way of drawing people's attention to the things that you're interested in. And then the other one would be providing additional context. So I remember her showing the example of zooming in on a map. So starting out from a wide frame of reference, so somebody sees maybe the country of Canada, and then zooming all the way into Alberta and then into Calgary ultimately. So providing additional context to where it's needed. I do not remember the last point that she made in that presentation, but I remember it was a great one. So if she tosses it in the chat, I will, happily let her say that one.
Yeah. Right. I do have one. Right. So
Wait 1 sec. Emily, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah.
No, but I'm very glad that you took something away from my talk. Yeah, so I talked about three things: color, movement, and bringing emotion into visualizations and report building as well. But yeah, that's a pretty good summary.
Yes.
For movement is giving some context to your data. So
those are all the things that I would love to talk about. The non-technical side, I would say, of things: bringing emotion, storytelling, how you want to lay it out, how to get your audience engaged, how to make users actually use your reports, have, a page that tells them how to use the report, or info buttons, or things that get them to click things, little things like that. Thanks so much, Emily. Appreciate that.
All right. Thank you, Chris, Jared, Deanna, and Tutu. Right now, we're just going to open it up as a 5-minute open forum. If you have any questions to ask our presenters, or if you'd like to introduce yourself in the audience, feel free to raise your hand or come off mute, turn your camera on, and we open the panel to you.
I got one really quick one that I'm really excited about, but I want to make sure we've got time for others as well. I'm a huge fan, and this is best practice. It's not so much about Power BI itself, but it's about training your users how to use the application you've built properly. We always kind of, like, when we're talking about Power BI, we're often talking about an audience from Excel, moving over into Power BI, and there's some mind shift things that need to happen from the two. We often also hear people saying, I'd like to have that export to Excel. Where's the export to Excel button? So always have to keep in mind that we're changing people's behaviors and the way they interact with information. So I can sit here till I'm blue in the face and talk to you about how wonderful Power BI is. Look at all the data it can handle, the interactivity, controlling, putting different visuals, drill downs, drill across, all that type of stuff. But if you hand your application to user and they fundamentally don't know how to use it, they will eventually say, how do I import this to Excel? And that's one thing we always want to guard against. In fact, I tell new people that are coming into Power BI that if you hear that, how do I export to Excel? That's your opportunity to jump in and guide a user through a new way of getting and interacting with their information. So never, ever discount the importance of training, no matter how simple you think your application is. Show your users how to use it and walk them through it, and then make yourself available for them after the fact. That's the only way to kind of keep adoption going, and then keep adding more to it, and then build that collaboration and trust between you and the business. If you just throw it to them, eventually they're going to say, this doesn't meet my needs anymore. I'm out of here, back to export to Excel, and then we're back to square one. So I'm huge on the training piece, but I'll stop there.
All right, Jared, did you have anything to add?
I had one additional best practice that I really want to talk about with DAX, just because it was kind of brought up with what Tutu was saying. We mentioned that, actually, Doreen, I believe, mentioned this as well. When we had documented between measures that are just summing up on a visual or being aggregated in some way. But these are the implicit measures. So if you see that little sigma beside one of your column types, it means that you can aggregate it in some way. You just drag it on the visual, sums things up. I never use them. I always explicitly define all of my measures, even if it's just summing up a column. And the reason is that if you don't do that, anybody that connects to your model from, say, Excel cannot use that column as an aggregating value. They can only use it as a descriptor. So I always define my measures explicitly, and then just hide the underlying column, in all honesty. Tutu, feel free to disagree or disagree with me if you want.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're a beginner, okay, it's fine for you to drag a column into that and then use the measures. But if I've seen you before, if you've been to our classes and I know you and you do that again, I'm going to... All right, use measures.
Picking on people too.
All right.
Greg, it looks like you have your hand up.
It is probably a hard question to answer because it can go on forever. What about governance of reports, where you get multiple people developing, even the business unit developing, 5 people do slightly different formula of the same thing? Like, do you have any best practices to try and govern report development? Maybe using things like published data sets or a publishing process, and I'm sure it's complicated, but I don't know if you have like 1 or 2 quick wins or some good practices to try and manage that so that you don't get 2 different reports with 2 different numbers, right? Because 2 different people have developed them.
All right, so there's one thing that just introduced this year. Guess what it is? By Microsoft. You know?
No, because I'm asking the question, so you'll have to tell me.
I'm asking the yeah, what it is. Power BI. We were just talking about that. Power BI.
Oh, you mean the published data sets?
No, Power BI Data Mart. So that is actually one thing that Power BI just announced this year that you can actually use to further allow your collaboration a bit more than just self-service. Because when you use Power BI Data Mart, you're actually creating all the transformation in the Power BI service. You are creating the data, you are creating the calculations in Power BI service, you're creating DAX in Power BI service, you're actually creating the, what they call it, the relationships in Power BI service. So this is great because a Power BI Data Mart resides in a workspace, right? And everybody that is in that workspace will be able to go in and then collaborate better. So that is one thing that is awesome when it comes to Power BI Data Mart, right? But it's still in preview, so be aware because things may change. I always tell people, like, if you are using something in preview, just be aware because things may change. Try not to use that in production. But then again, it all depends on the reporting that you are doing, because like when it comes to Power BI reporting, we have self-service, we have managed BI, we have enterprise. All of these are going to have different approach when it comes to governance and when it comes to the development process of it, right? Some can use CI/CD, some can't. Some use deployment pipelines, some use Power BI data mart. But one thing that I see quite often and easy to do is actually chaining. So basically, it's using like golden data set and then build on top of that golden data set by creating more data set. Sounds awesome, but at the same time, it does cause you a lot of disadvantages, because now it's every calculation, everything that you want to do now propagates. The lineage is going to multiple gold data sets, and sometimes it's a bit hard to validate your information. All right, what about you, Diana? Do you have any input?
Yeah, I know you kind of said like quick wins and for best practices with governance, if you're kind of feeling like you're a little bit stuck, start the conversation. That's a big step. Have a center, start setting up, like have a center of excellence. Start talking to people about who would be owners, like who are going to be the Power BI administrators, who are the report developers, how much freedom are we going to allow everyone. Start seeing what processes are currently in place to see if there's any gaps and everything, and assess it that way. Try to get people on board, and then from there you can see where you need to go, how you want to architect it from then on, what processes you need to put, or roadblocks maybe you need to put in place so that the tenant doesn't get out of hand. But having a maybe like a weekly meeting to just start getting that going is probably a good place to start, and start just looking at what you have, what it looks like, and if there's any risk for data exfiltration or security. And also, you said having two different reports with like two different information. Another big thing with governance that I see coming up now a lot more, because data is getting really big, is having a data glossary. You can manage this easily on your own, or pay lots of money to have a tool have a tool do it for you and be kept. But it will save you, it can save you millions having a definition of something, going through a project and having misinterpreted the word sales may have, like, you may have lost lots of money for your company. So it's good to have, the metrics, the columns, everything laid out somewhere for everyone to use. It can be maybe in a Power BI dashboard even, so that everyone is on the same page from the data standpoint, and everyone can trust the data. If you are seeing two different reports with different data, you don't have any trust in that data. So that's how you start developing the trust, having your data glossary, having everyone agreed upon who owns the data, who owns this part, so that people can be kept liable. Yeah, that was good. That was it for me.
Yeah, I think the most important part of that whole thing that you just said there, Deanna, is the collaboration and communication, right? We can put all the technology we want in front of things. People do need to collaborate and communicate with each other and let them know that, that we're doing kind of duplicate things, and have that conversation and discuss how we're going to get to a single version of the truth. The technology is there to support it, but you need to have the people actually doing the talking to make sure that we continue to rally around those central truths. One of the things one of the concepts that we talk about an awful lot around Power BI with new users is the concept of fewer data sets and fewer reports. I compare that to the Excel world. We tend to have just numerous versions of the same things over and over and over again, and lots of repetition, and that repetition leads to conflict, even within the same spreadsheets. And everyone's been to that barbecue before. But having collaboration and communication, that's a big piece of it. And just having fewer data sets, no matter what mechanism you're using, shared data sets, the Power BI data marts, just having less. We do only have 1 minute left here, so maybe Maria, roll it to the last slide. We can kind of just wrap up for today because we are at the last minute. This has been a fantastic format. Really like this discussion. It went better than I thought it might go, but yeah, it'd be nice to get some feedback at everybody on this. And over to you, Maria, to wrap things up.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And thank you everyone for spending your lunch hour with us today, talking about Power BI best practices. We hope you took some useful facts from this presentation. And yes, Tutu, next time we are in person. So stay tuned for 2023. We will be hosting these sessions hybrid. So both in person and virtually. You can find those on the Calgary Power Platform user group LinkedIn page, on the Iteration Insights website, or on the Microsoft community page. And with that, I think that's a wrap. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.